The weekly message of the United Church of Christ of Homelstown, Pennsylvania, a podcast version of our worship service. To learn more and listen to the rest of the worship, check us out online at homelstownucc.org.
You hypocrites. How do we get to this point? Now, I don't know about you, but I've been called a hypocrite more than once. And to be honest, I am. You see, whenever I do anything, and I know I shouldn't do, I have so many excuses in my head. Well, you see, the situation. Well, if you knew the whole story. But when other people do something, I attribute it to their character. I say, that's just the way they are. They're just a no good. Yeah, I'm a hypocrite. I am. And let me explain how this works. You see, from the first time I came to your church back in June, we've been talking about ordinary time. That time that causes us to put green on the pulpit and the lectern, and reminds us that we're not talking about a specific thing in the life of Jesus, like Jim is going to be playing on, the 14th, the 13th, he's going to be playing the organ about music about Christmas and Easter, and those are events in the life of Jesus. And we have time in the Christian calendar where we talk about those. But ordinary time doesn't involve that. Ordinary time is about our ministry in the world. And we get there by thinking about our own faith life. We have to think about how can we grow. Thus the green. And a few weeks ago we talked about faith as being part of that. We talked about faith in terms of trust. We trust in God, and because we trust in God, we act in fidelity to that trust. Faith is more a verb than a noun. We act faithfully. We live faithfully. It's part of what one author calls the with God life. And it gets real practical. It gets real specific. Jesus gives us the way to do this. Let me use two examples from the Gospel of Matthew. One is this idea of salt and light. Now, I am sure you've heard a ton of sermons about the characteristics of salt, what that means for us as Christians, the characteristics of light, what it means for us as Christians. That's great, but the main kind of theme of this is you're in public. Your faith is not to be lived privately. Now, that's contrary to what many of you were taught. Polite people don't talk about politics and religion in public. Basically, because we don't know how to talk about it without arguing. But Jesus tells us you are to be salt, you're to change whatever you come in contact with, you are to purify, you are to be the kind of people in the world, kind of like salt is to meat. And in those days, of course, what it was primarily used for was to purify and to keep from spoiling. And then there's light, of course, which means we are to shine for truth in the darkness. And, okay, that's really good stuff. I love the story of the person who comes to talk to her pastor because, the pastor is the kind of person that can bring truth into every and any situation. And the woman comes and says, Pastor, I just got hired for a job, but the problem is it's really not a very nice place. The people are nasty. I like the job, but it feels like a really dark place. Pastor, why would God send me to this place to work? And he says, God puts light where God needs light. Have you ever been in a situation where you realized that it was really kind of dark and maybe you're supposed to be the light? Well, I'd be fine if Jesus stopped there because that's really general enough. I can kind of, go with the flow with that. I can be salt where I feel like being salt. I can be light when I want to. But then Jesus gets really, really specific in Matthew chapter 25. Most of you know that chapter. It's a chapter that we love to preach when we're feeling holier than thou. It's about, well, did you do these things for me? Well, Jesus, I don't remember when you were there. I don't remember doing these things for you. Well, when you did them for the least of these, you did them unto me. Do you remember when you didn't do these things? Jesus, I don't remember not doing those things for you. Well, when you didn't do these things for the least of me, you didn't do them for me. And my goodness, there's even consequences involved. It is not easy being a Christian in the world. And so we've got folks in our community, in our families, who have left the church. Maybe this church, another church, certainly the church I pastor. And we have people in our community, maybe even in our families, who have left the church because they've been hurt by people in the church. We have people who are traumatized by the church. We have people in our lives who have left the church because of the hypocrisy of the church. Some of you know I kind of live life most of the time in my own head. I like doing research. I'm one of those kind of people that, the library is my favorite place. And I've been researching something probably the last 2 years about a phenomenon which is called deconstructing faith. Now, deconstructing faith, what that means is that you start questioning everything about your faith, everything that you were taught. You start saying, is that really true? Is this, who are you kidding? Do I have to believe this in order to be a Christian? You start questioning everything. Now, this has been around a very long time. In other words, almost as long as there's been faith, there have been people who, as they grew up, they questioned it. Things they were taught as children just didn't seem to hold true as adults. But we've been talking a lot about it. Really, this idea where the word deconstruction came into play in the late 70s, early 80s, when we entered into this concept that people were calling postmodernism, but you don't care about that. What is important for us to think about is we have got a lot of people in our society these days who are hurting because what they feel their church taught them when they were younger, the church itself is no longer doing. Love your neighbor. Well, we all know how we learned about loving your neighbor. We learned it because Jesus was asked the question, what is the most important commandment? The person said, love God and love your neighbor. And then Jesus asked, but who is my neighbor? And I talked a number of weeks ago when we were back downstairs because we didn't have air conditioning. And we talked about Jesus flipped the question, and the church has been really kind of having a problem with this one these days. Love your neighbor, however, love your neighbor, but love your neighbor, except one day I was sitting in a meeting of a group of young people. They had invited me to their young adult gathering of our church, and I was in that meeting and they started asking me questions. That's the reason I was there. I was the pastor, and they could ask me anything, and we started talking about stuff, Looking around the room. Okay, PG-13. Okay, right. Somebody asked me, why do my parents get so freaked out about the idea that I'm having sex? And of course, the answer to that is, why do you get so freaked out at the idea of your parents having sex? And then I told them why. But the real question that has to do with us this morning is, they said, Mike, I've grown up in this church. You've been my pastor my entire life. And I remember you saying that we could invite anyone to church, to youth group. I remember you saying that, but I can't. Not because of you, Mike, but because there are other people in the church that wouldn't accept them. That person was beginning the process of deconstruction. They were realizing their church wasn't the perfect place they thought it was. It's hard to be a Christian in public these days. It's hard to be a Christian in an age where that is generally understood to be not about following Jesus, but about following a political idea. It's hard to be a Christian these days when being a Christian often means that you use words to separate rather than bring together. I've had people walk out of my church because I said Christians build bridges, not walls. That wasn't Christian in their mind. So I've got in my head a group of people who are trying to figure out, is the church relevant in my life? Can I pay attention to what I learned as a child? Is there anything? There are those people who've walked away and said, I want nothing to do with the church anymore. But there are those people who've been traumatized by what's happened to them in church, and they're saying, but I still want a faith life. I still want to pray. I still want to... In fact, I really, really like everything Jesus taught. I just don't like the church right now. What do I do? How many of you have someone in your own life who is like that right now? Anybody? So what do we do? So what do we do? Do we come in as the Bible answer person and say, well, you really need to? Do we go up to them and say, listen, you don't seem to have your life together right now. Can I pray for you? Do we interject our own personal feelings about their lifestyle, their worldview? We don't. Because that just will trigger the trauma that they are living with. What do we do to live faithfully in front of those we care about who do not want to hear church talk, but need to know that they are loved? What do we do? Well, if we had time... Oh, wait, I have 3 more weeks. We could get into some real specifics here, but here's what I want you to do. Okay? First, don't be obnoxious. Sometimes for me that's a stretch, but don't be obnoxious. Don't be judgmental. Please don't be judgmental. Don't preach to somebody who doesn't want to hear a sermon. I assume you came here today and you're at least tolerating. But live in such a way that they will see your good works and bless the God you serve. Let me say that again. Don't be obnoxious. Don't be judgmental. Don't preach to somebody who doesn't want to hear a sermon. But live in such a way that they will see your good works and praise the God you serve. That's kind of the meaning of love your neighbor in the real world. I hope you are picturing those people in your life right now who you desperately want them to know that you love them, you care about them, and everything else is just details. I hope you are picturing right now opportunities in your community not to put the sign up that says that folks are going to hell if they don't follow your way. But instead, bake the cookies. Help them with a ride to the doctor. Smile when you see them. You don't present yourself as perfect, you present yourself as real. And maybe they'll get the idea that you're one of the good ones. And maybe when they're having a really bad day, you'll be the one that is given permission to love them a little bit. That's living faithfully in the real world. Amen.
This has been the weekly worship from the United Church of Christ of Hummelstown. No matter who you are, or where you are, on life's journey, you are welcome here. Join us online or in person, at 104 East Main Street in Hummelstown, Sundays at 10:30 a.m. Thank you for listening today. We look forward to your fellowship.